there's a book that came out recently by Jake Tapper of CNN and Axios, Alex Thompson, called Original Sin. It's about the cover-up decline of Joe Biden.
Called Original Sin. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's on Biden's decline. It's called Original Sin.
And the disastrous choice of him choosing to run in 2024 until he was forcibly ejected from the ticket.
I are here to say that conservative media was right and conservative media was correct.
What Jake Tapper doesn't tell you is he didn't just deny that Joe Biden was cognitively impaired. He really was rude and attacked people who said that he was.
There should be a lot of soul searching, not just among me, but among the legacy media to begin with, all of us, for how this was covered or not covered sufficiently. 100%.
And I remember that Lara Trump. He cut her off and he made fun of her and he said that she was basically a cruel person.
That somebody in the Trump family would be more sensitive to people who do not have medical licenses.
He knew that it wasn't just a matter of a stutter, and he did that on numerous occasions. So that was number one. And then number two, he could have come forward any time after Joe Biden left office, or even after he was stepped down. He didn't. He only came forward really as in connection with this book. And then three, if you think about it, he can say all he wants post facto about an apology, but he's going to profit enormously off I guess it's a conspiracy or it's either incompetence that he was a central part of.
Jake Tapper is a CNN grandee, 7-figure salary, kind of an iconic figure in this left-wing media.
Why did Jake Tapper spend years defending Joe Biden's mental acuity, only to turn around and publish a book about his decline? Why now? When the truth was dangerous, he mocked it. Now that it's obvious, he sells it. What kind of journalist does that? Is this courage or cowardice cloaked in opportunism?
But my point is this: for the last 4 years, again and again and again, if anybody questioned the obvious mental decline of Joe Biden, his cognitive difficulties, Jake Tapper, and went on CNN, Jake Tapper tore them apart. Here is someone who promulgated the greatest cover-up in the history of the U.S. presidency, helped. And we were told that Joe Biden was fit as the fiddle. We had medical reports that obviously or mysteriously did not have one critical indicator that were apparent on the Trump and Obama presidential medical records releases. There was no PSA test, an indicator of the health or malignancy of one's prostate.
Oh, I get that. I get that. Okay.
No one was more instrumental in berating, maybe Joe Scarborough, but other than he, Jake Tapper tore apart anybody who suggested that Joe Biden was as cognitive in decline as they saw with their own eyes and heard him.
I saw what everybody else saw, right? I saw what everybody else saw, the stumbles in front of the camera and that, but I saw him in person.
When the Wall Street Journal wrote in a definitive story, Jake Tapper wrote them off as Murdoch Fox propagandists. Why did he write a book now? Well, the obvious answer is that Joe Biden has no power. And these media people in Washington they're like moths to a flame. They gravitate to power. And when you don't have power, you don't have friends, and there's no downside in telling the truth. Why didn't Jake Tapper write this a year ago? Because he knows what would have happened. Somebody in the White House would have called up and said, Tapper, no one from CNN is going to get a seat at a press conference. There's not going to be any CNN interviews. So he backed down.
I mean, if you look at what this president did, he destroyed U.S. deterrence with the debacle in Afghanistan. He told Putin he wouldn't react unless it was basically if it was a minor invasion. Mm-hmm. He distanced himself from Israel. He empowered Hezbollah. He was responsible, I think, for 2 theater wars on his watch. He had hyperinflation. And now we're starting to say, well, maybe he didn't do any of it. The auto pen, maybe he didn't even know who he was pardoning. Maybe he didn't even know where he was. And then it gets worse.
So long, she knew so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured.
And nobody believes that he didn't have a serious problem that was covered up. So it's a multi-layered, multifaceted effort to delude the American people for cheap political purposes. It involved his medical team, it involved his staff, it involved the surrogate people who were really running the country, and it involved the media. That cheap fake, that was a talking point for 6 months. That if anybody questioned him or they looked at a video where he was lost or wandering, they said it's cheap fake, cheap fake, cheap fake.
And that's exactly what they are. They are cheap fakes video. They are done in bad faith.
And now, in a very cowardly fashion, now he comes out and he is blaming the White House cover-up. But what he doesn't tell us is the White House cover-up would have been impossible had not CNN, MSNBC, PBS, NBC, ABC, CBS all conspired with the White House staff to downplay, not just downplay Biden's cognitive decline, but attack people. Bottom line, they had more interest in protecting this left-wing administration who was using this waxen effigy of Joe Biden. And for someone's purposes, we don't know who was running the country, who was giving him the auto pin executive orders. We don't have no idea who those people are. We have a suspicion it was the Obama crowd. But nevertheless, they didn't care about that. They did not care about that. All they knew is that this was a left-wing agenda and it had to be preserved by any means necessary. And that included lying, covering up, and worst of all, demonizing and attacking people who sought to tell the truth about Joe Biden.
Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar, I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any standing to say...
I'm not diagnosing him. What I'm saying, Jake,
you just talked
is
about
that
a cognitive decline.
See that Joe Biden
I have one last question for you, Lara.
Now the real Jake Tapper is in this book, who's now telling truth to power. No, you're telling truth to impotence. Joe Biden has got cancer. He's written off. He's in decline. The family is disgraced. It's easy now to write about that. It was hard and would require intellectual courage, moral fortitude to say this when he was the most powerful man in the world. And so, Jake Tapper, you failed that test. And you should pay a penalty. CNN should look very carefully on whether they want to retain him, because this is one of the greatest acts of duplicity, moral duplicity I've seen in my entire life. And it joins a long list of collusion, capers, conspiracy, bogus, frauds, ruses. Jake Tapper, you should go back and see what was your position on Russian collusion. What was your position on Hunter laptop disinformation? What was your position on the Steele dossier? What was your position on the 51 intelligence authorities? And I think in every one of those cases, you failed the test of truth. And you really did this time in the greatest cover-up in the history, as I said, of the American presidency. And it's not over yet.
Jake Tapper wasn't a bystander. He was a gatekeeper, slamming the doors shut on anyone who dared speak the obvious truth. He mocked. He shamed. He protected the narrative. Jake Tapper didn't speak truth to power. He helped silence it. And history won't forget.